A week or so ago, I made a video taking a look at 7 average footballers with incredible CVs. Or, at the very least, 7 footballers with very generous CVs in relation to their talent. Feel free to give that video a watch after this one if you haven't done already, but following on from its relative popularity among subscribers, I thought I'd continue down a similar theme of taking a look at 7 average, or as I say at least, far from world-class players who scored goals of huge importance on some of world football's biggest stages. I must admit, I got lost down a bit of a rabbit hole researching this one, and I ended up with about 25 of what I felt were really interesting examples, but hopefully that means I'm able to pick out 7 exquisite ones for your viewing pleasure. Without further ado though, here are 7 average, or at least sub-optimal footballers who scored some truly enormous goals. Divock Origi. For a centre forward who is, let's face it, very suboptimal, Divock Origi has actually scored a few telling goals. In fact, there can't be many players in history who have scored a brace in a Champions League semi-final and then a goal in the final for the winning team despite being so average. In the 2018-19 season, Divock Origi scored just 3 goals in the Premier League, yet he scored the same number of goals in just 2 games as Liverpool won European football's most prestigious knockout competition. Though Origi bagged a brace against Barca and completed the scoring for Liverpool in the final against Tottenham Hotspur, it is that second goal against Barcelona that lives longest in the memory and was the most significant purely in terms of it being the winning goal. We ought not forget that Liverpool went into that Champions League semi-final second leg 3-0 down, and they were without both Mohamed Salah and Roberto Firmino through injury. They needed some inspiration from somewhere, and Origi provided that unlikely spark. Whilst Trent Alexander-Arnold tends to get most of the credit for the quick thinking involved in that corner kick, I think the finish by Origi with the bouncing ball in a game of that magnitude is all too often overlooked, or at least not fully appreciated. A brilliant goal in an enormous game from a pretty mediocre centre forward in truth, but without him, Liverpool would most likely still be in search of their 6th Champions League crown. Giuliano Boletti. Sticking with key goals in the Champions League just for now, I feel that I should caveat this inclusion by pointing out that I was probably among Giuliano Boletti's biggest fans in the mid to late 2000s. I mean, I didn't have posters of him plastered all over my bedroom wall like I do now with Jules Koundé, don't get me wrong, but I thought he was a little bit underrated. Boletti didn't score many goals, fewer than 25 for both club and country, across his entire career. But when he did find the back of the net, it tended to either be in spectacular fashion or at a crucial moment in time. Or indeed, both. The Brazilian spent just 3 seasons at Barcelona, and the Catalan Giants are more synonymous with the Brazilian right-back who arrived at the Camp Nou after him in 2008. However, if it weren't for Boletti, Barcelona might not have won that elusive second European crown in 2006. With just 15 minutes remaining on the clock in the 2006 Champions League final against Arsenal, Barcelona trailed the North Londoners 1-0. The introduction of Henrik Larsson, Giuliano Boletti and Andres Iniesta from the bench turned the game on its head though. Larsson created both goals, the first converted by Samuel Eto'o and the second by Boletti, who had only been on the pitch for 9 minutes. It was a 1-2 between Boletti and Larsson that created the opening, before Boletti fired the ball into the back of the net with the assistance of some dodgy goalkeeping from Manuel Almunia. Boletti wasn't a bad fullback, but nor was he a spectacular one, and I think he's good value for a spot in 6 following his decisive Champions League winning strike. Adriano Gabrielu. I suspect a fair old number of you are wondering who the hell is Adriano Gabrielu, which only goes to show what a fine candidate he is for this 7. Gabrielu was a diminutive Brazilian number 10 who is best remembered for his time with Atletico Paranaense, where he won 1 cap for Brazil in 2003. However, it was in 2006, following a move to Copa Libertadores Champions Internacional, that Gabrielu scored his most memorable goal. It came in the final of the FIFA Club World Cup in Japan against a Barcelona team boasting the likes of Carlos Puyol, Andres Iniesta and Ronaldinho. In fact, it was the same Barcelona team that beat Arsenal 2-1 in that year's Champions League final, and Giuliano Boletti also came on as a substitute in this game. However, it was Gabrielu's day rather than Boletti's on this occasion, as he came on in the 76th minute as a substitute, and within 6 minutes, he had broken the deadlock. The former Marseille loanee was aided by a slack Barcelona back line and some very dubious goalkeeping from Victor Valdez. But all that mattered was the fact that one of only 4 goals that Gabrielu ever scored for Internacional before disappearing from the face of the earth, aged only 29, made his team world champions. I know the importance of the Club World Cup is somewhat disputed here in Europe, but it is a very big deal in South America. So Gabrielu's goal was certainly huge to him and to his team. Lars Ricken. Again, I don't wish to give the impression that I'm suggesting that any of the players in this 7 are or were bad players, just that they scored goals of a magnitude greater than their talent, if that makes sense. Lars Ricken, for example, was a very capable midfielder. A one-club man, he was once Borussia Dortmund's youngest ever debutant, and he retired following 405 appearances for the German Giants due to crippling injury struggles, aged only 31. Though Ricken often played as a number 10, he was never a prolific goalscorer, only hitting double figures for a single season in all competitions once during his entire career. However, there are players who score more than 300 goals in a career and never score one nearly as important or as impressive as the goal that Ricken scored against Juventus in the 1997 Champions League final. There have been better goals scored in Champions League and European Cup finals than Ricken's remarkable lob over Angelo Peruzzi's head, but arguably none more surreal or unexpected. As he galloped after the ball, you didn't really fancy Ricken to have the pace to beat both defenders and to bear down on goal, but he cut out the middleman entirely by just hitting it first time. The ball just seemed to curve into the back of the Juventus net, making the technique look easy, but it was anything but. What's more, the German had been on the pitch for less than 60 seconds when he produced that finish. Dortmund won the game 3-1 to lift their first European crown following that strike. Vladimir Schmitzer. Unlike most of the other players in this 7, Vladimir Schmitzer did actually score a fair number of goals. Roughly 100 in all competitions, for both club and country, but as he said himself, "I have scored some nicer goals maybe, but this was definitely the most important goal of my career." That tends to be the case when you score a goal in a Champions League final, but when you score a goal in perhaps the greatest Champions League final comeback win of all time, well, then it's even more likely to be the case. Liverpool famously trailed AC Milan 3-0 at half-time in the 2005 Champions League final, and they were very fortunate not to be losing by more. Schmitzer had been introduced as a 23rd minute substitute in place of the injured Harry Kewell during a season in which he hadn't scored a single goal. His only goal of the campaign would rank among the most important goals ever scored by a player representing Liverpool Football Club though. Having received the ball from Didi Hamann, Schmitzer quickly got the ball out of his feet before firing it past Eder in the AC Milan goal. When the game finally went to penalties, Schmitzer, it's often forgotten, also actually scored the winning penalty. So his impact on that game, and ultimately Liverpool winning the Champions League, was enormous. The other goal scorers in that game were Paolo Maldini, Hernan Crespo, Steven Gerrard, and Xabi Alonso. Schmitzer wasn't a bad footballer, but he was never in that bracket, and his crucial strike from 2005 deservedly features. Eder. My first thought when I had this video idea was none other than Eder, the ultimate average player who scored a huge goal. The goal I'm referring to is, of course, Eder's recent strike in Lokomotiv Moscow's 4-1 win against Rostov, which looks likely to secure Lokomotiv a top 4 finish in the Russian Premier League this season. No, not really. I'm talking about his goal in the Euro 2016 final. It's worth remembering that Portugal started that game with Cristiano Ronaldo up front, who had scored 51 goals in 48 games for Real Madrid that season, and ended it with Eder up front, who had failed to score a single goal in 15 games during his half-season on loan at Swansea City. And yet, in extra time, it was Ronaldo playing the role of cheerleader, whilst Eder's beautifully placed strike saw Portugal win their first ever major trophy. Absolute scenes. Whilst I've caveated some of these inclusions, I don't have too many qualms with calling Eder an average centre-forward. Indeed, at the elite level, which is what the final of the European Championships is after all, I think you could make quite a good case for him being significantly worse than average. On that evening, though, at the Stade de France, Eder silenced 75,000 Parisians, and it is for that goal that he will always be remembered. Kelvin. Kelvin Matthias de Oliveira, better known simply as Kelvin, is a man who will be familiar with our Portuguese viewers and possibly a few Brazilians, but not a lot of people outside of that. A quick and skillful wide player, Kelvin was brought to Porto from Brazil at the age of only 18. Following a season on loan at Rio Ave, Kelvin stepped up to the first team at Porto in the 2012-13 campaign. He was really a bit-part player during his debut campaign in what was a pretty extraordinary season of Portuguese football. Despite going unbeaten all season, Porto weren't guaranteed of winning the Primeira Liga title going into the final few games. In fact, with just 2 games to go, unbeaten Porto were 2 points behind Benfica. As it happened, however, in the penultimate game of the season, Porto hosted the side that they had to leapfrog in order to be crowned as champions. You can probably guess where I'm going with this. In an incredibly tightly fought game that had been tied at 1-1 from the 24th minute onwards, 19-year-old Kelvin received a bouncing ball on the edge of the area in injury time, seemingly with nothing on. He took one touch with his right foot, and with his second touch, he fired a left-footed strike into the back of the net. Porto won the game 2-1 and the Primeira Liga title by just 1 point. Kelvin spent another 6 years contracted to Porto, but he barely played another game. Loans back to Brazil were followed by a permanent move in 2019, and the journeyman 27-year-old recently joined Villanova in Brazil's second tier. Honourable mentions go to Federico Macheda and his last-minute winner for Manchester United against Aston Villa in 2009 as a 17-year-old, which effectively handed Fergie's men the Premier League title. Greece legend Angelos Karisteas, who scored the only goal in the final of Euro 2004 against Portugal, Michael Thomas, who scored the winning goal for Arsenal at Anfield that saw them beat Liverpool to the Premier League title before joining Liverpool 2 years later, and Ben Watson, who scored the only goal for Wigan Athletic via his forehead from a corner against Manchester City in the 2013 FA Cup final, among many others. There are also examples of lots of average or not exactly superstars who have scored huge goals in the context of being spoilers. Say, someone like Dwight McNeil for Crystal Palace against Liverpool in that famous Cristamble game. And then, if you drop down just a little bit, you'll find examples like Ricardo Vazte scoring the winning goal for West Ham against Blackpool in the Championship playoff final, which, financially, is the biggest game and the biggest goal in all of world football, but as technically a second-tier fixture, perhaps it is a little less surprising to see winning goals from lesser lustrous players. Anyway, that is it for today's video, but thank you all very much as ever for watching. Hit that like button if you enjoyed today's video. Apparently it helps with the algorithm. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications by just hitting that little notifications bell to make sure that you never miss an upload, or at least you never miss out on knowing that I have uploaded a video on HITC Sevens. You can also find me on social media platforms such as Twitter and Instagram via the username @HITC Sevens on both, should you wish to do so.